Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Today, we're going to be talking again about Autodesk's cloud-based PDM and PLM solution, Upchain, and how that can benefit everyone, even those people that don't use any other Autodesk products. And so I'm going to start today by discussing sort of the business case or the use case for PLM and PDM specifically. And then we'll get into a review of what sort of functionality and what Upchain can offer from an actual data and information management perspective. But again, let's start with why you might bother using PDM or PLM. Businesses today face a lot of challenges. And aside from the pandemic, which just exacerbated some of these things, businesses have faced these for years. And software is really advancing to the point where we can address a lot of these things without a whole lot of effort and time, implementing the tools to do so. So there's a lot that goes into product development and a lot that can get in the way of getting your product out the door. So as we talk about the business case for PLM, think about how your business operates today, the challenges that you face, and you'll probably see a lot of what I'm talking about around you on a day-to-day basis. Right, globalization is a big challenge. Outsourcing of work, offshoring of work, not just manufacturing work overseas now, but often design work overseas. Bottlenecks in processes. Processes involve people. And, if you don't have a good way to track what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and when it needs to be done, things tend to get lost in the shuffle. The inability to share data appropriately. Again, people located all over the country, all over the globe, files scattered on file shares, and these three people are working from home this week because they got exposed to COVID, and now they can't work effectively because they're on the VPN. All of that, those hassles and hurdles that come about when not everyone is in the same physical location. Repetitive and manual efforts, having to create a PDF of every drawing that you make so that the shop has something to look at, and remembering to update that PDF every time there's a revision. And then on that note, a lack of collaboration, the fact that you might send a PDF out to a network folder, and then if there's a problem, maybe you hear about it, maybe you don't. And then maybe you get partial information about that problem coming back to you, and then you're forced to solve it, right? An inability to collaborate with the people who have the information that you need to solve your problem can be a huge challenge. And then, maybe the buzzword of the year for 2021, and maybe even into this year, supply chain. The pandemic has really highlighted just how important the supply chain is and maintaining that properly. Lack of proper supply chain management these days can just kill your business. Now, a big challenge from a systemic standpoint or software standpoint is that a lot of traditional systems are built for the way we did things in the past, say 15, 20 years ago, when maybe everything involved in creating and manufacturing and delivering a product was done in one place, right? And when everything could be forced to be standardized. Everyone uses this CAD package or else, and everyone does things this way. And we've been one organization for 50 years and we just have always done it this way. And these days, that's not really the case anymore. I don't know how many companies I talk to where they've either been acquired or acquired a business or two or three, related. And the goal in those acquisitions is always, let's combine the businesses, combine the overhead and combine the engineering and be agile in manufacturing in different locations. But everyone's using a different tool and has different processes. And I don't know how many cases I've seen where companies never quite get to actualize what the mergers promised, which was, like bringing in the best of each organization and becoming more agile. Especially traditional PLM systems and a lot of business systems aren't built well for that. Right. And if companies don't adapt and change the way they work and never realize those gains that, say, merging are supposed to promise, they're going to get left behind, right? When you take multiple systems and try to cram them all together just because, say, we acquired this company and they were using this software and we use some other software, now everyone's using the same thing. It just becomes a mess, right? And studies have shown over the years, engineers can waste as many as 2 months out of the year looking for product data. They can't find, I know I created a part for this 6 months ago. I don't know where it went. I'm just going to recreate it. Or it's going to take me a week to recreate it, and it's going to take me 2 days to find it. It's just faster for me to try to find it. Those are the decisions that engineers end up having to make. An engineer has on average 10 systems that they have to interact with to make one change. ERP systems and PDM systems and PLM systems and CMS and, just all these acronyms, all these different icons on your desktop, you got to open up and do something in. And that leads to real problems for the business, right? Again, studies have shown that, up to 83% of new products miss their cost targets. And 79% of those products miss their launch date. And, you may be able to work around cost issues, but, if you're second or third to market with a product, you could lose a lot of share. So there's a lot at stake in the manufacturing world anymore. And again, these challenges, distributed workforce, information overload, too many systems to work with, just how fast we're supposed to be able to react and make changes to things. And so many different sources of data coming at us. There's a lot to deal with, and it's only getting more complex, right? If you've ever, seen or had a conversation like this where, who's doing that? Well, I think Josie's doing that. Well, where's the email on that? Is this done yet? Who did that? Where's that file? I just sent it to you. Like, I never saw it, right? If you're using email or Dropbox or, phone calls or something, it's a wonder that anything gets done. And again, there's real impact of all of this on business. Again, some more examples, surveys conducted by Tech Clarity. 63% of companies miss their design due dates. 65% have issues with their managing their project and program budgets. You can see quality has been a real big focus over the last couple decades, and you can see people really do spend a lot of time devoted to quality. That shows in a survey like this, because it's hard to recover if you deliver a bad product, right? You can spend decades building a reputation and ruin it in weeks, if not faster. And then, of course, time to market, right? So all of these things, delivering on time and on budget, having engineers spend time looking for things and not being able to communicate, not be able to react to change fast enough. Those are all major contributing factors to these real world issues that we see. So if we're talking about, if we want to think about how we go from ideation of a product to production, sale, service, retirement, you might think about breaking this down into three major areas, three different topics: data, people, and process. You need to manage your product data properly. You need to get the right people involved at the right time. And you need to execute on your business processes efficiently, right? And if we look at the challenges in each of those areas, when it comes to data, 48% of companies have said that they have issues finding the right information. A similar number say that they've wasted time searching for data. And I have to think, I've talked to literally hundreds and hundreds of companies over the years, and that number's got to be higher. I don't know that I've ever talked to any company that said, yeah, our data is pretty well organized and it's easy to find things. I don't think I've ever heard that. Reusing data is a big deal, but I think the big one here, even though the number looks kind of small, working on wrong or outdated data. It only takes cutting a piece of metal wrong one time potentially to pay for some of the software that can help you alleviate some of these issues. So if you're not sure if you've had issues, managing your data, you can ask yourself some questions. Have you lost product data? I know I did that. Now I can't find it. I guess I have to redo it, right? Did you redo your work? How did you get around that? Have you started manufacturing using wrong or outdated data? How much did that cost you? And when it happened, did you identify why it happened? And what steps did you take to prevent it in the future? Or is this just the cost of doing business? And what value do you think that your engineers and others could get out of easily finding and understanding your past design decisions and changes? Why are we making this the way we are today? Well, because 3 months ago, we fixed this problem, and 3 months before that, we fixed that problem. So that's how we got where we are. So no, we can't do it this way because we tried that before and it didn't work. History repeats itself. The best way to prevent that is to have a good handle on history. So again, most companies that I talk to have some issues managing their product data. But people are a big part of this too. Getting people to work together, enabling collaboration. Collaboration is an essential part of delivering a quality product on time and on budget. But not quite a majority, but close to a majority of companies have said that they have issues collaborating with internally with departments, internal, but also collaborating with customers and suppliers, right? I'm old enough to remember when email wasn't a thing, and email is great, but I don't know about you, but I get 100 or more emails a day. And wading through that list every day to find the important things and keeping track of the important emails so that I can refer back to them, that is a management task in and of itself. So email is great, but it's not the best tool for collaboration. And the pandemic, I think, showed us that, while ideally the best collaboration is in person, face to face, suddenly when you're all working at home for 2 weeks or 6 months or 2 years, if you were relying on being in the same room as people to get the job done and you can't do that anymore, that's a serious hurdle to jump. So if you're not sure if you have issues with collaboration, again, some things to ask yourself: are your engineers able to work together effectively, no matter where they are? Right, that's important. How easy is it for your engineers to collaborate with other departments? So when you need to get outside of engineering, what's communications between engineering and other groups like? How easy is it for you to share data with suppliers and customers? Do you just throw some files on Dropbox and send a link? How do they provide feedback to you? How do they visualize your designs? How do they make decisions that you need them to make? And if they're not able to collaborate with customers, your engineers, and other parts of the company, does that slow down product development? Does it cost you money? Does it result in errors that need to be corrected later in development where it's much more expensive? How much time do engineers waste wading through email and looking for, who said what about this change or this issue? Again, if you've got a distributed workforce, be it because they're at home in quarantine or because you've got 5 different divisions in 3 different countries, does everyone have equal access to that information, or does a sizable design group, overseas spend a lot of time waiting for files to download because it just makes sense to have the bulk of the data, say, local to the US, right? And again, I talked, earlier about mergers and, the idea that when you acquire a business, one of the goals is to combine resources, combine talent, be able to engineer and manufacture more flexibly. I've seen a lot of companies say they were going to go that route and either take literally a decade to get there or never get there at all. And finally, the process side of things. So again, data, being able to find things and knowing where your data is and how it's managed, people, collaboration and communication, but now process, the actual actions it takes to go, again, from ideation to manufacture, sale, and retirement of the product. Everyone has processes. If you're shipping product, you have a process. Whether or not that process is optimized, though, is a different story, right? Change is inevitable. Everyone manages change today somehow. But again, a majority of companies report they have issues managing change. Companies also have issues managing BOMs and configurations, or managing design data to specific projects, and managing project and task execution. Who's supposed to do this change? Well, maybe there's a spreadsheet, a big list of open ECOs in a spreadsheet, and somebody has to go and open that spreadsheet and see who's supposed to do what, but only one person at a time can have it open for edit. So who's making changes to it? All of these things that you've got a process, and maybe the idea of the process is pretty good, but the tools you have to execute that process may not be optimal, right? So if you're not sure about that, again, ask yourself, just how do you handle release of new designs today, and how do you handle change today? Are these efficient processes? does everyone get involved when they're supposed to get involved, right? So that people see the right information at the right time and can make decisions that they're supposed to make when they're supposed to make them. From a management perspective, how easy is it to see a given project and where it stands? And do you have to comply with industry standards or government regulations, ISO, ITAR, et cetera? How do you ensure compliance? Does complying slow you down? And have you had issues with compliance costing you business or costing you customers because you maybe couldn't meet a certain standard, right? So again, data, people, and process. So the three pillars of proper product design, manufacture, and sale. Now, if you're having issues in these areas, and again, I don't know that I've ever talked to a company that's got, everything running like clockwork. There are ways to solve these problems. Upchain from Autodesk is one of those possible solutions, right? So the rest of our presentation is going to focus on Autodesk Upchain and a bit about how it works and what it can do for you. So I hope up to this point, you've gotten a sense of why it's important to manage data properly, make sure people can collaborate, and have good controlled processes. So now we're going to talk about Upchain and how it can deliver from a software standpoint on improving, those areas. So Upchain is an out-of-the-box configured software as a service solution. So it is completely cloud-based and hosted. So it means if you're using Upchain, you don't have to maintain a server. You don't have IT overhead to maintain that server, right? It's software as a service. Again, it is also configured. It comes pre-configured with solid industry best practices built in from a process standpoint. It is also completely CAD agnostic, meaning whatever CAD design software you use, there are a few niche things that may not support. We'll get into the actual support here in a minute, but all of the most popular mechanical CAD softwares are supported by Upchain. It lets you view engineering data, whatever the source format, in a neutral format so that everyone can consume it easily. Visualization of design data is always a challenge, and Upchain makes that very easy, as you'll see. And in terms of implementation, because all of this is great, but if it takes you 18 months and $1 million to implement a system like this, you may not be able to justify the cost. But one of the biggest benefits of Autodesk Upchain is the dramatically reduced implementation time for most businesses because of the out-of-the-box configuration and the deployment methodology called Connect the Chain. So this is something you can literally have up and running in days to weeks, not months to years. So some of the high-level things that Autodesk Upchain can provide: bill of materials management, change management, supplier management, cloud-based CAD data and document management, right? That's a big one. Workflow and process management, quality management, program and product management, new product introduction. So all of these things are capable with the Upchain platform, right? And the idea is it takes what you might have today, your disparate teams throughout the organization and throughout the world, and organize them into collaborative group where people can execute efficiently and cost effectively. So that's the aim. So let's talk a little bit now about what Upchain can do. We're going to take a look at the interface and some of its capabilities to get you a sense of, if you were to adopt Autodesk Upchain, what you could look forward to. So from an engineering data management perspective, just some terminology here. In terms of managing native CAD data, Upchain supports AutoCAD, Solidworks, Inventor, Creo, NX, and then there are some electrical packages too that it supports. We'll talk about in a second. But the basic idea is you have your CAD software that provides your CAD BOM that gets added to Upchain, the PLM solution, and essentially is transformed into the engineering BOM. And you can also manage the service BOM too. So Upchain fits here in the middle. It's the bridge between your CAD software and your execution software, your ERP or your MRP system, where you may have heard the term XBOM, but essentially that bill of materials, the recipe for the product, gets sliced and diced in various ways depending on the need, right? The service BOM, the as-built BOM, the manufacturing BOM. Upchain is here in the middle today, right? It maintains your engineering BOM and can maintain a service BOM. Execution is still the realm of something like ERP. So let's take a look now at a basic interface overview and the core of Upchain's organizational structure, which are called projects. So the first thing you'll notice about Upchain is it's a nice, clean, and modern UI, right? This is a web-based interface that we're seeing here. And the heart of Upchain is the project. You see a list of projects up here at the top. It's the project that powers all of the collaboration and innovation within the software. Down here at the bottom, I have some of my specific information, activity stream on my projects, my favorites, and things that have been assigned to me. So if we look at a specific project, over on the left, we have a nice little menu of common product management workflows, bill of materials, project management, business processes, etc. And it's organized and designed to be usable by both experienced and infrequent users. Now, the dashboard provides me and all members of the team information about the project, where it stands, right? All at a glance, all in real time. If we need to access the BOM, it's a single click away. Now, projects do need to be managed. We can manage tasks related to the project, tasks, milestones, stage gates, so we can get a complete sense of where the project stands and what still needs to be done. Right? Tasks can be linked to project artifacts, deliverables, etc., and assigned to individuals. When it comes to business processes, things like change requests, investigation requests, change notices, all of those are available, manageable within the project. Project members can create and review and report on things like requirements and investigations. And then in addition to the CAD-centric bill of materials, we can also manage documentation, Word documents, PowerPoint, spreadsheets, to enable a complete product definition. And I've mentioned, members of the project a couple times already. Every project can have a team associated with it, with roles within the project, to make sure that the right people get informed at the right time about things they might need to do. So that's just a basic overview of the interface. Again, very straightforward, very clean, very easy to use. Now, when it comes to managing designs and specifically CAD data, Upchain can do that too, again, all in the cloud. So you're seeing a screen capture here of SolidWorks. We're going to see in an action here in just a second. But again, Upchain supports various CAD packages: Inventor, AutoCAD, SolidWorks, CATIA, Creo, NX, Altium, and Onshape. And you have a unified user experience. So the way a SolidWorks user interacts from their CAD package is the same way a CATIA user would interact or an Inventor user would interact. So, you're not forced into, well, with this package, the way this add-in was written by this third party, so it works this way, and our NX users are using this add-in and it kind of works that way, and our Creo users don't have an add-in at all, so they just kind of manage their files in some other weird way. With Upchain, you don't have to worry about that. Everyone interacts with the system in the same way. Right? So let's take a look at how the CAD integration would work with Upchain. Again, Upchain is completely CAD agnostic. All CAD users have the same experience, whether they're using SolidWorks, CATIA, NX, Inventor, AutoCAD, Creo. Everyone has the same experience through the CAD plugin. So taking a look at that plugin here inside SolidWorks, it's on a special palette, and I can look at my current assignments, everything that's assigned to me right now, and see detailed information about that assignment. So in this case, we've got an assignment, we've got a product issue, and we can see information about that assignment right here inside my CAD browser. The issue is the belt's too thin and we're seeing disintegration in the field. And I can also get information, in this case, a screen capture of a markup that someone did, right? So I can see specifically what they're talking about. Again, all of this is tied to the task in Upchain. In addition to that, the part number I need to work on is right there too. And I can just open that up straight from the Upchain plugin. So again, I don't have to go hunting for that CAD file somewhere. Everything is right there at my fingertips. And notice the assembly opened quickly. That's because while all this CAD data is stored in the cloud, Upchain does maintain a local cache on your computer. So when you're working with things, you're working locally. Now in this case, we're going to check out to make an edit. If you've ever used a data management system, you'll be familiar with that concept. I'm checking the file out so that other people know that I've got it under work. And my colleagues will see when they look at this part that I have it checked out, right? Notice the little padlocks in the browser over there on the right. Now from here, I can open up the part that needs the edit, in this case, the belt, and make my change, right? And that's just 90% CAD work. Right click, open, and then make the change, right? So edit your sketch, change the parameter, update. That in turns update the assembly, right? If you've used parametric CAD, this should all be very familiar to you, right? And when I'm done with my change, I would check that back into Upchain. And that's going to save my changes back to the system. Now when I do a check-in, I get a nice confirmation dialog so that I can be sure of exactly what it is I'm adding back to the system, right? So the belt changed, the assembly that contains that belt, therefore also changed, right? And for everything that I'm adding into the system, I can provide a description. Again, communication, people can see what I did and why I did it, right? So in this case, the top level is being updated, and then the belt itself, we're modifying the thickness of it. Now, if we go back to Upchain, once we've got this checked in, we can actually see through its visualization environment that it in fact has been updated. So this is a view of Upchain. We can say, look at a hidden line view. This is the visualization tool. We'll see more of that in a minute. And we could take a measurement to make sure that our change actually did get added to the system. And again, that viewing is all inside of a browser. Right. So again, every CAD system that it supports, Inventor, SolidWorks, Creo, NX, CATIA, every user would have the same experience that you saw there. So if you've got disparate organizations within your company that are tied to specific CAD tools for whatever reason, everyone can play nicely in the same sandbox in the same way. Now, moving beyond the CAD file and data management, we would get into bill of materials management and visualization. And Upchain has some incredibly powerful tools there as well. So managing bills of material in Upchain is a very natural experience. You can load that bill of materials from the top down by either creating new items inside of Upchain or uploading via Excel. There's a dedicated Excel plugin to facilitate uploading BOMs from Excel, because Excel is the most popular BOM management tool I've ever seen. But also bottom up from the CAD application. So let's take a look at this camera, for example. This is an electromechanical device, and so there's a mechanical assembly and an electrical assembly. In this case, our mechanical assembly comes from Solidworks. Our electrical assembly comes from Altium. Both of them were developed in Upchain by adding the data from the CAD package. And then we added on some additional items in Upchain to complete the definition of the top-level SKU. Now, if you click on an item in Upchain, you get a context menu with lots of things you can do with that item. For example, you could view the model of the drawing. You could create a business process against it. You could copy and paste to manipulate bills of material. Very intuitive. I need this part on this BOM, copy, paste, right? You could compare visually. You could import or export data, right? So anything you might want to do to that BOM object, you can do. Now, comparison is a big deal in Upchain. So we're going to start by checking out a comparison between two different BOM revisions. And it's, again, a very intuitive, very clean interface. Any rows in green are components that are new to this revision. Any components in red have been removed in this revision. And anything in yellow are components that were maintained, but for some reason, the metadata is different. So you get, at a glance, you can see the nature of the change of this revision. But we can also do 3D comparisons. So if we look at the actual CAD data here, again, you can see green faces are new, red faces are those that have been deleted. So you can get a very quick sense of exactly how this product changed. Now, when it comes to visualization, Upchain's visualization tools are frankly fantastic. Lots of different ways to interrogate the model, from adding cutting planes dynamically to doing exploded views, taking measurements, and even doing markups right inside the interface. So in addition to markups, what you'll see is that users using this visualization environment can create investigation requests straight from the interface. So if they identify a problem, they can create a markup and immediately trigger a process to have that handled. Now, getting into the process side of things, right? So we've talked about data. We talked a little bit about people, right? The ability to collaborate effectively, checking in and checking out of data, making note of a change in what you did, being able to create an investigation request straight from a model markup so that you can communicate more effectively. Now we're into the process side of things. And again, Upchain has a host of existing business processes predefined, but it's also possible to configure your own. So let's take a look at those processes. So there are several processes out of the box, and you can manipulate those however you might need, either by starting with an existing process and modifying it, or by creating one completely from scratch. So for example, we might decide we want to create a completely new change request workflow. To create these workflows, we have a group of primitives that we can drag onto a palette to provide I guess, the aspects of a business process. So decisions and tasks, these things can be linked together, and then things that happen in the system, print something out, update a record, provide a notification, right? So drag your cursor to link these things together to develop the process that you need. So let's take a look now at a change process or a change request in action. So let's say we need to release some components here. We're going to send them to a change request. We can either select a few components and send them, or pick an assembly, and by default, all of its components will be included. So we need to release this entire assembly. We can select the entire assembly. Right now, everything's in development, and send that all at once to the change request. Note also that the current major revision is XX, meaning we've not released this yet. So all of these components have now landed on a change request. We can provide a description for this change. In this case, it's our initial release. We're doing a new major release of everything. We also can do minor releases in the system. And we can include a note for that revision. In this case, it's initial release, but if it was an actual change, you could include information about that component related to this change. Now, you can have different workflows depending on the types of changes you have. This is a simple release process. And in this process, the same user in this example is going to be doing every step. In a real process, you'd have multiple people involved. But once the process is started, I would get a notification saying I have something to do. When I now need to execute this, I could come to Upchain, release the items, and that's going to put them all now from a development state into a released state. It's also going to update their major revision from XX now to AA. So just like that, I was able to take files that were in development and get them released. So again, that's one of the out-of-the-box workflows. So if you know you need this kind of behavior, but you don't want to spend a lot of time and effort getting complex processes in place, you could use that immediately out of the box. And then one last topic, the idea of supplier management and participation. And this is someplace that I think Upchain really shines. Again, over the last couple of years, supply chain management has become one of the hardest parts of doing business, and Upchain can really provide a lot of benefit in that area. So let's take a look at this right now. So what you'll see here, we can maintain a list of suppliers inside Upchain. Upchain also does have an API that can be integrated with other business systems. So while you could certainly create suppliers, this can also be directly integrated from an ERP system. And we can associate those suppliers with individual components within the system. And for each supplier, there's supplier-specific information about those components. For example, what their quote price is, what their part number is. And if we need to get a new quote from a new supplier on a component, we can actually initiate a process inside Upchain for that, right? There's a supplier RFQ workflow out of the box. And again, we can provide them ultimately a link to this document and other documents within Upchain if we need to, or from our disk. So this information is going to be available to the supplier. So what we see here, this is an email that was sent to the supplier. The supplier would receive an email like this, right? And there would be a link to get into our Upchain tenant, and only that supplier with that user account could get to this information. And they're only allowed to see what you let them see. So they don't have free access to your system. This is a very isolated, interface into the environment. But here's what the supplier would see. They can see the component. Again, this is in the viewer, so they can get what they need. They could potentially download a neutral format, and they can update information, your Upchain information specific to their supplier right inside this interface. And so you'll see here in a second, while the supplier is typing this in, wherever in the world they happen to be, it's going to be in the Upchain system. Also, again, let's say the PDF you provided that was an RFQ form, they can actually check that out from Upchain and modify it to provide their information and then check that back in. And they don't need a license of Upchain to do this. They can just do this by virtue of you owning Upchain. And now what you see is their quote information specific to that manufacturer is now in Upchain, and no intervention on your part was necessary. They were able to do that automatically. So again, I don't know that interacting with suppliers could get much easier than that. All right, and so that ends our very brief tour of Upchain functionality. And just to summarize the presentation today, many of our systems, both our existing manual processes and software we use today, have been built for the past. Companies do need to adapt or get left behind. We have customers that are adapting and adapting very quickly, and we can see their success. Upchain is a tool that can help you adapt so you don't get left behind. And it is truly effective data and process management in the cloud that enables that adaptation. So with that, we'll address any questions that have come up. So I'm not seeing any questions that have come in over the course of the presentation. I hope that means everyone understood what I said. We'll give it just another, say, 30 seconds here, and then we'll wrap up. All right, so no questions come in, so I think, Ashley, we'll just go ahead and wrap it up for today.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the presentation. Thank you all for attending. Just a reminder that we will have a short survey pop up as we close down. And also, you will receive an email tomorrow with the link to the recording. So with that, we'll close. Thank you all for attending and have a great day, everybody.